All right, let's get into it. If you're looking at a career in consulting, finance, or asset management, you absolutely have to understand credit risk. I mean, it's the bedrock of so much of what happens in the market. So today, we're going to crack it open. What it is, how it's priced, and the high-stakes drama that plays out every single day. So let me ask you a question, just to frame this up. You go out and buy a corporate bond, lending your money to a big company. What are the actual odds, the real probability that you're just not going to get paid back? It's the first, most important question you have to ask yourself. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, what's the price of taking on that risk? Because the answer isn't just about the company's chances of failing. The real price tag is way more complex, and honestly, it's a lot more fascinating than you might think. Okay, so let's start with the absolute basics. Let's build a solid foundation here. What exactly is credit risk? At its heart, it's super simple. Credit risk is just the chance that the person or company you lent money to won't hold up their end of the bargain. It could be a missed interest payment, or it could be a total failure to pay back the original loan. It's all credit risk. So if we know what the risk is, how do we actually put a price on it? Well, in the bond market, that price tag has a very specific name. It's called the credit spread. The easiest way to think about a credit spread is like an insurance premium. You're taking on a risk, so you get paid extra for it. It's the additional return or yield you get on top of what you'd earn from a super safe government bond. And we measure it in something called basis points, or BPS, where 100 BPS is just 1 percentage point. Simple as that. And this right here, this is what we call the credit spread puzzle. You'd think that the extra yield you're getting is all about compensating you for the chance the company might go bust, right? But what's wild is that for good, high-quality bonds, nearly half of that compensation has absolutely nothing to do with the company defaulting. So, what's in that other half? Well, think of them as hidden fees you're getting paid for. First, there's a tax premium, because you have to pay state taxes on corporate bond income, which you don't for treasuries. Then there's a liquidity premium. It's just harder to buy and sell a corporate bond than a treasury, so you get paid extra for that hassle. And finally, there's a systematic risk premium. This is for the big, economy-wide risks that you just can't diversify away. The key thing to remember is this. You're being paid for a lot more than just default risk. Okay, now let's talk about the big referees in this game, the credit rating agencies like S&P and Moody's. Their ratings aren't just an opinion. They have real structural power in the market. And you never see that power more clearly than during one of the most dramatic events in the bond world, the birth of a fallen angel. That's the name for a company that gets its credit rating slashed from the safe investment grade category down to the risky junk category. But here's the twist. The market is almost always ahead of the game. Get this. In the 3 months before the rating agency makes the official announcement, that company's credit spread has already widened by an average of 245 basis points. The market can smell the trouble coming from a mile away. And this timeline really shows you why. That panic in the months before, that's just smart investors getting out early. But the actual downgrade day is what really causes the chaos. Why? Because you have these giant pension funds and insurance companies whose own rules legally forbid them from owning junk bonds. The moment that reading changes, they become forced sellers. They have to dump those bonds, period. And that fire sale is what causes the huge price shock. It can take a whole year for things to calm down and for the bond to find its new home. So we've been talking about companies. But what happens when the very thing we use as our risk-free benchmark isn't actually risk-free anymore? Yeah, let's talk about the final boss, sovereign risk. So check this out. When you compare risky corporate debt to risky government debt, the default rates are basically the same, around 4.7%, 4.8%, practically identical. But the huge difference is what happens after the default. A company goes through a pretty structured process in bankruptcy court that takes about a year. A country? Oh man, that's just a messy, drawn-out political fight with no clear rulebook, and it takes more than twice as long to sort out. And that uncertainty has led to this really weird 21st century thing. You've heard of flight to quality, right? When markets get scary, everyone sells stocks and buys safe government bonds. Well, now we're seeing something called a flight to credit. That's where investors are actually more scared of their own government's debt than they are of a big, stable company's debt. Think about that. We're now in a world where a company like Apple can borrow money more cheaply than some governments. It's wild. If you want to see sovereign risk in action, just look at the Greek debt crisis. Back in 2010, the markets suddenly woke up and realized how bad Greece's finances were. The risk premium on their bonds, compared to super safe German bonds, didn't just go up, it exploded. We're talking from 225 basis points to over 1,000 in just a few months. That's a total and complete collapse of confidence. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground. We've talked concepts, market dynamics, all of it. Now, let's boil this all down into an interview prep kit so you know exactly what you need to walk into that finance or consulting interview and nail it. So if you remember nothing else, remember these 3 things. Number 1, the credit spread is more than just default risk. It's packed with other factors like liquidity and taxes. Number 2, rating agencies are more like regulatory triggers than information providers. The fallen angel effect is all about that forced selling. And number 3, risk-free isn't really a thing anymore. Sovereign risk is real, and it's changing the game. So what does this actually look like in an interview? Well, they're probably going to ask you questions just like these. Be ready to talk about that credit spread puzzle. Be ready to explain how rating agencies are really just triggers. And for sure, be ready to discuss sovereign risk and this whole flight to credit idea. And I'll just leave you with this one last thought to chew on. Pretty much every single asset in the financial world is valued based on its relationship to the risk-free rate. That's the foundation. So, if that foundation starts to crack, if it's no longer a given, how on earth are we supposed to value everything else?